The winter season is arriving in Australia, and I want to dive more into my music taste as I plan to hang out with friends in the cold. As I am growing older, my music taste has scattered throughout different genres. One of the many categories that I found soothing is a warm, welcoming sound of imperfection, unpolished production, raw ambience, and the harmonic rhythm, infusing low-fidelity music. Lo-fi, attempting to compose songs with minimal instruments, a genre that the majority are fond of due to its peaceful nature, has taken many forms on the internet and on streams. Jazz lo-fi, chill lo-fi, study lo-fi, anime lo-fi. There are countless hybrids waiting to be discovered and listened to in our lifetime. One in particular that I love is lo-fi hip-hop. Listeners tune into this particular sound, the scent that brings us calm, to be present in the moment, and more people are gathered together in unison. Puzzling at first who inspired this unique idea to mainstream. As we plunge into history, numerous artists have incorporated the concept of lo-fi, especially fusing hip-hop, influenced one another. Individual compositions are all connected in some way, in some form. All gathered together. It leads to he who everyone acclaims, the godfather of lo-fi hip-hop, Nujabes.
I told you that story to tell you this one.
Nujabes, also known as Jun Seba, a Japanese record producer initially praised as being the godfather of lo-fi. Although many had argued that he did not pioneer the concept of lo-fi entirely, however, one can say that he had inspired many artists, both present and future composers, to create their interpretation of lo-fi hip-hop. In 1995, Nujabes was composing music in the underground scene of hip-hop, and during this time, he was in a place called DJ Bar Inkstick, where he had met an editor named Toru Hashimoto during a club event called Free Soul Underground. At first, Toru thought Jun was an awkward person, but was passionate for music, and when Jun took notice he was an editor for Suburbia Suite working on a new issue, he says he wanted to be a writer, and so Hashimoto wanted to credit him using his real name Jun Yamada, but instead went with Jun Seba. Nujabes opened up a record store in July, Guinness Records in Udagawa-cho, Shibuya. Continuing forward into 1998, founded an independent label, Hideout Productions. Onwards, he started to release 12-inch singles to the public under that label, and during the early days, Hideout Productions wanted to hide the fact they were a Japanese label, and thus began misconceptions that Nujabes was a foreign producer. As of this video, their website couldn't be accessed, and Hideout Productions was active 2 years ago on Facebook under Shop Tribe, where their recent post was about a composer, Haruka Nakamura, and a vinyl that contained songs that seemed to be in tribute to him. Additionally, on Twitter/X, their recent post was this year in February, advertising Nujabes' 50th anniversary and celebrating it by playing his songs through Fukuoka, Osaka, Tokyo, and Kyoto. For the Guinness record store, they had a website linked to this account, but it no longer exists. I'm assuming that due to low maintenance, they needed to shut it down. Not much information was provided upon exploring what Hideout Production really is, considering that the people that worked for him in the early days would end up working in rough recordings, or even what was left of Guinness Records' store through their website for me to research and recall on insights. However, Jun's discography kicked off in 1999 with his debut single, Ain't No Mystery. Not really known to a wide audience as far as I can tell, and as I was tuning in while writing what I want to say for this video, I'm really liking this.
360 repeat history. You list to see Mr. Do clear MCs out on mystery, mouth clean. Envisioning allowing nonsense is nowhere to be seen.
His previous works were trial and error, and regardless, they actually turned out great. And so, moving forward, he released 2 albums, Metaphorical Music in 2003 and Modal Soul in 2005. The transition between the 2 albums, he contributed his musical piece in a 2004 anime, Samurai Champloo, about a woman who is seeking a samurai who smells of sunflowers with the help of Mugen Yen, and Jin. Metaphorical Music was published under a different label, Dimid Recordings, instead of Hideout Productions, in fear that Jun couldn't juggle being a producer and a record label at the same time. And so, his plan on advertising music was not just through record shops, but with the hand of Masakatsu Takeuchi, a former representative director at Libius Music and was a production assistant for Samurai Champloo Music Records, handing flyers through cafes and beauty salons. He thought that it wouldn't bring attention to people that would be interested in an idea of hip-hop playing in a background instead of a club, but Nujabes believed it would sell. To Takeuchi's surprise, it was a huge success. For Modal Soul, it is the best starting point for newcomers and for people that wish to expand their particular taste in lo-fi hip-hop. A lot of fans would steer into this album. Modal Soul would incorporate a lot of elements that the previous album, Metaphorical Music, had to offer, fusing jazz, soul, and hip-hop. Released under his label Hideout Productions, Modal Soul was Nujabes' magnum opus. Despite releasing 2 studio albums and an unfinished album that was published after his unfortunate death in 2010, he is still highly regarded as one of the greatest in the music industry. While possibly many people overseas like the United States or Canada had not caught on with his discography in his lifetime, they would eventually tune in after the fact of not just his untimely death, but also the rise of social media like YouTube or Twitter would pick up what he had left and appreciate his works. His passionate ambition of hip-hop was demonstrated through his small yet sensational library of songs to be tuned in by many, and wanted to push this agenda of hip-hop being on the same level as any other mainstream music around the world. Oh, and I forgot to add, he released Sweet Sticky Thing. It wasn't released to the public, rather it was stored in a cassette tape. There were no sources of it on the internet until years later would it resurface with side A and side B. I'll give you a snippet. From his rise in the music industry to a legacy he left behind, Nujabes was not an ordinary man who owned a record shop, rather it was more than that. He was never afraid to compose his intended vision of music, the way he produces songs that stand the test of time. Regardless of his presence in the industry being short-lived, social media and mainstream went beyond his purpose, and paved the way of musicians both present and upcoming artists that aspire to craft their own interpretation of lo-fi hip-hop for the next generation of culture to hear and enjoy. Let's take a look at his studio albums. With his extensive knowledge of hip-hop, jazz, and soul music, he took us by surprise with Metaphorical Music. Featured artists like Psystar, 5Ds, and Shingotu, whose voice we associate so much with Nujabes' composition, especially where he collaborated with Nujabes in Samurai Champloo with Battle Cry.
Yeah, sharp like an edge of a samurai sword, the mental blade cut through flesh and bone. No, my mind's at peace, the word out of order, listen then the heat, life gets colder. Oh yes, I have to...
Metaphorical Music is a blissful album containing 15 songs and around an hour and 2 minutes of listening. My favorite has got to be Lady Brown.
Brush a coal to a diamond, eyes forever shining. Your beauty alone inspire a nigga to rhyming. Thinking of the better things in life. Thinking of how I could persuade you to become my wife. Hand in hand as we floating over tropical sands. You're my lady, I'm your man, so let's further advance to the next scene. Me sleeping next to you resting. You're the personification of all God's blessings. Coming to me.
This album, forming a hybrid between those 3 mentioned musical genres, is stunning. The way Nujabes produces these instrumentals is so relaxing. Visuals of bliss in every song, especially Letter from Yokosuka, the music that's playing in the background, and even depiction of unconditional love like how Lady Brown portrays. Metaphorical Music is beautiful. It dives into love, sex, loyalty. Maybe I'm thinking this because Lady Brown and Think Different have something in common with those topics, and some songs can also be interpreted as perception of life. The struggling aspect of it and how people can overcome it through persevering the idea of achieving dreams, and that topic can be supported through first in, last out. It's quite ecstatic, and we may never have the same impact that Nujabes had with Metaphorical Music in terms of vibe, a composer imbuing their visions effectively, and it's worth listening to his other works as he demonstrates his great knowledge of those mentioned genres. Here's a passage from Nujabes when opening Metaphorical Music's vinyl cover. This music is a metaphor of my imaginary scenery. The scenery is also a metaphor of this world I feel and listen to when I see it. Between me and the outside world, there are walls that block it. There are no walls that people cannot blend into the world. The way they form is different on the other side. And on the other side is music that rings. It sounds something like a wave different from the sound in the body, paradoxically speaking, waves in the body can be displayed as sounds in the outside world. This wave is like a ripple that the wind creates from the outside world, and that wind contains countless sounds. It's like a ping pong ball going around the court. We cannot capture them with words that something will come and go to and from the other side. However, the process changes like a gentle wave shaving a rock. It's a miracle of heavenly body. Sometimes you are on the other side, pores open and take in, flush out from your fingertips. I think that it is better to cut out pieces of the truth that cannot exist as words in this world. I think it should be possible to express someone else's feelings through the form of sound. There is music at the end of the wave, and there is a wave at the end of the music. Modal Soul was his second and final studio album. Metaphorical music paved a way for Nujabes in the music industry. With Modal Soul, he clarifies his observation of music and what it means to create songs to people. Spanning over 14 songs and over an hour and 3 minutes, we hear familiar artists like Psystar and Shing02, and we got a new artist in the album, Terry Callier, a jazz and soul specialist. It is a simple proposal for fans around the world to recommend Modal Soul for newcomers due to his clear vision of musical genres that allow him to experiment in his studio. As mentioned before, this is his magnum opus, meaning this gave him the opportunity to shine and demonstrate his pinnacle music making skills to listeners that want a taste of those multiple genres. Modal Soul is alluring. A more popular song in that album, Feather, I really enjoyed this the most and makes me sway to the rhythm it produces. There's also Lovesick Part 3, and there are other parts that would remain separate into a collaborated album with Shing02, and Shing02 would end up finishing and publishing this album in tribute to Nujabes titled Lovesick Hexology, released in 2015. This album focuses on hopes, dreams, and the meaning of your inner self. Feather can support this idea of hope where Psystar describes the world discussing nothing but pain and suffering, and despite that, travels with aspirations inside, flying without looking back at a particular part of a world that hurts him. Ordinary Joe could also support not just hopes, but dreams too. Terry Callier tells the story of a bird that flies high and thinks it's easy to do so, but Callier thinks less of himself than the bird, for he says that the bird is a little bit freer than him, indicating it is loose and free without the constraint of others. And lastly, Lovesick Part 3 focuses on inner self. It is finding out who you are in this world without knowing what lies in the end. It's more of discovery than the destination, supporting the idea of pursuing your inner self and becoming resilient to a state of hopelessness. Modal Soul, being the final studio album Nujabes had produced and shared for all to listen to, is a fantastic album that the majority will recommend. Over 14 songs and over an hour and 3 minutes, this album offers a different perspective of music, what it means to create songs, and especially enlightens us of hope, dreams, and discovering your inner self.
We can take it all back to the register and start all over from the canister. Just break it all down in a piece of right. Moments that pass by like you need it, alright. Throw on your favorite reel, that's good to go. On the analog play.
This particular music review had compelled me to invest in my own taste of songs like never before. A fascinating way for me to discover what I like is finding out lo-fi, and with different variants waiting to be discovered in every corner, I find myself intrigued in this genre, especially with a hybrid of hip-hop and lo-fi fused together to create a unique sound. Nujabes was one that took me by surprise with his discography, with only a small yet a grand collection of musical productions that made me fall in love with them. It was one of the best experiences of tuning in with his studio albums Metaphorical Music and Modal Soul. He wasn't afraid to place his mind into every piece he crafts, and with the rise of the internet, we went further beyond his dreams, and we formed aspiring artists to create their vision of lo-fi hip-hop for the next generation to tune in and enjoy.